our attitudes around violence against women and misogyny. And in just the same way that other forms of prejudice have become socially unacceptable, used to be acceptable, I really think that we're seeing something similar happening, a real shift in our attitudes around women now. And I think that's incredibly exciting. And I think the fact that Facebook has taken a stand on this issue is a huge kind of milestone in that battle, because of the enormous influence that they have on cultural norms of what is and isn't acceptable.
I think another lesson to be taken away from this, it's very easy when you see something evil and horrible on the internet to be appalled. It's easy without realizing it to extrapolate that in your mind to the bigger picture. Oh my God, this ugly stuff is out there. Well, it is out there, but what your campaign has shown, and I credit you and Soraya Shamali and the Women Activist Media, what we've shown is that, yeah, it is out there, but the strength is in numbers, and they are not the majority. It is pervasive, but it's not the majority that thinks violence is funny or that thinks that a bruised woman is hysterical. That in a space as vast as the internet, it's kind of neat to see a way that you ask people to raise their hands and find out that more hands are in favor of decency.
Absolutely. It was really heartwarming, and I really feel like the tide is turning.
We're coming up against the end of the hour here. Tell me, what do you see for the future of everyday sexism? What do you want to expand into?
Well, I've got lots and lots of hopes for the future. The first thing is that I really hope that we can kind of nurture and grow the websites which are based in all the other countries to try and have the same kind of impact that it's had here. The USA site, which is usa.everydaysexism.com, has already seen hundreds and hundreds of entries, and I really hope that will kind of flourish and expand. But I also really, really hope to do more in terms of education and outreach and working with those young people that we've discussed several times today, because I think that is just so important. And I really think it's important that that's where the change should start from, before these ideas and attitudes become so ingrained that nobody even questions them anymore. We need to get in there and provide an alternative narrative. And I think that's really important. We've also got lots of really lovely, exciting things happening here, where the women who've written in and shared their stories, we're now able to take those stories off the page and use them to make actual concrete change. So we're working, for example, with the police here in the UK to tackle, looking at different ways to tackle sexual offences, for example, in public transport, as a result of the stories women have told us.
Well, I think at this point, I'm going to anticipate we're going to talk to you again about the progress you're making. And Laura Bates, thank you so much for all the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Laura Bates, the Everyday Sexism Project. We have links to everything we talked about on our website, indeepradio.com. In Deep is a production of Mix TV. You can send us feedback and suggestions via our website, indeepradio.com. Our executive producer is Gordon Whiting, engineer Matt Fiddler, producer is Forrest Phillips, studio manager is Jill Fiddler. Yana Barkless is our acquisitions producer. Our theme is by Big Troubles, with our closing theme by David Gans, and we will see you next week. Thank you for being here. I'm Angie Coiro.
Yes, I know it's gonna get better, 'cause it almost always does. I can't say much about the who and how, but I believe.
I'm Angie Coiro with In Deep. I hope you can join us this week for the latest in a long line of conversations with important voices from across America and the world. We're a liberal program that understands we need to learn and to challenge our assumptions every day to make
News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, once again guest hosting because David Shuster is on paternity leave, but of course this will be my last week doing that. This beautiful Saturday, June 22nd, 2013, right here in the We Act Radio studios in Anacostia, Washington, D.C. We have an incredible show ahead of us, but first, in this first 6 minutes, we wanted to talk a little bit about the passing of a person that was very, very important to many people here in Washington and across the country, and that is a young prominent journalist who died unfortunately too young, Michael Hastings. He was the author of the award-winning article, The Runaway General. It was an article back in 2010 in Rolling Stone that brought down General Stanley McChrystal, the man running the war in Afghanistan, for, in fact, insinuating bad things about his civilian superiors, that he did not care what they thought, that he was essentially running the war on his own. He was a man renowned for being able to get powerful people like General McChrystal to open up that way. He was only 33 years old, Michael Hastings. He died in a car crash earlier this week in Los Angeles. And many of his friends have said that despite the fact that he always singled out the most powerful people in an organization as the ones he wanted to target with his journalism, and that he was able to do that so effectively and elicit their trust, despite the fact that they knew that he was their adversary. In person, he was apparently an incredibly generous teacher to young journalists, including to Ruby Kramer, someone who he worked with at BuzzFeed, where he was covering the presidential campaign this past year. He wrote over 96 articles for them, as well as Ali Gharib. He's the senior editor of Open Zion, a blog for the Daily Beast and Newsweek. And Ali was a close friend of his. Ali wrote a beautiful eulogy for Michael Hastings on the Daily Beast. And Ali, if you're on the line, we have just a couple minutes. Okay, we have not been able to reach him at this stage, but I really encourage you to read Ali's piece and really think about who this person was, age 33, someone whose mark had yet to be made, and what kind of world he would be in, we would be in if he continued to live and produce journalism into his prime. This was someone who harkened back to the old school of really not trading access for good things, of not trading, not being willing to sort of be sycophantic to people in power just for the sake of access to what they were providing there. And I think that that's something certainly to be incredibly admired. And that's something we're going to continue to think about later on during the show. Of course, this week also saw the passing of the legendary actor James Gandolfini. And James was the man who played Tony Soprano in the legendary HBO series The Sopranos. He was a mob boss with a psychological interior that made him extremely sympathetic, a complex character. I'm certainly a fan of his acting, and I know that he also did a lot of work on behalf of veterans of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he's a son of New Jersey, actually from Bergen County, where I'm from, so special place in my heart for that. I thought that there was an incredible obituary for him in the New York Times that essentially said that in a lot of ways he embodied New Jersey and created the cultural context in which a figure like Chris Christie could emerge, actually, as governor, because like Christie, James Gandolfini was, at least in his character of Tony Soprano and many of the other tough guy roles that he played, including as Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta in the recent film Zero Dark 30, a man with a tough exterior who had a lot of bluster, a lot of anger, a lot of outward expression and emotion, but inside we could see a certain sensitivity, a certain sadness about the world, and I think that that is something to be valued. We've got an incredible show ahead of us. We're going to be talking, first of all, about the latest in the National Security Agency scandals, how the president's been explaining it in the media, how Congress is reacting, and of course the latest news about the attempts to extradite Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker from Hong Kong. You're not going to want to miss that. Later on in the hour, we're going to be talking to Addie Stan from RH Reality Check about the latest in the war on women and how House Republicans are attempting to ban certain kinds of abortion and what that means for women. Just a few moments, we're going to be joined by our syndicated stations in Columbus, Grand Rapids, Chicago, and across the country as we welcome all of our listeners everywhere on Take Action News right after this. But we've got actually got one more minute, I should say. We're a little bit off today. But another interview that's coming up today that is extremely important is at 1 o'clock, and I want everyone to tune in for this. At 1:05, I'm going to have the extraordinary honor and privilege to be speaking with Kalpona Akhtar. She's the executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity. And she grew up in the sweatshops of Bangladesh. And She was there from the ages of 12 to 20, earning $6 a month, working 450 hours a month. And now she's in charge of leading the charge for greater workers' rights and better conditions in that country. Fascinating interview. It's an issue we've been covering, so stay tuned for that. Just a few seconds now, our syndicated stations are going to join us when Take Action News continues after this.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act radio studios in Washington, D.C. Heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Good afternoon and welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins once again guest hosting as David Shuster is on paternity leave. And we're going to get right to it. There is late breaking news in the National Security Agency leak scandal, and that is that the United States government is charging Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker, with violations of the Espionage Act and 1917 law against betrayal and being working for foreign governments. They have said that he's violated the clauses of that law that say that, quote, unauthorized communication of national defense information and, quote, willful communication of classified communications intelligence information to an unauthorized person is illegal and constitutes an act of espionage. Of course, it's traditionally been used to prosecute people that are perceived to be spying on behalf of foreign governments, trading secrets in order to work against the interests of the United States, though it was used to prosecute Vietnam War leaker Daniel Ellsberg back in 1971. It was created for the purpose of recruitment against opponents of World War I. Here's how Glenn Greenwald responded to the news that Edward Snowden was going to be charged on the Espionage Act. Here's how Greenwald, who was a journalist from The Guardian, who first broke the news of the leak through Edward Snowden, reacted.
It's very surprising to accuse somebody of espionage who hasn't worked for a foreign government, who didn't covertly pass information to an adversary enemy of the United States.
And of course, the United States is seeking to extradite Snowden from Hong Kong and has asked the Hong Kong authorities, the Hong Kong government there, to detain him while they wait for extradition, and that they will then extradite him to the United States. Of course, Hong Kong does have an extradition agreement with the United States, but there is an exception for cases of a political nature, and if Snowden claims that he is being prosecuted for political reasons, that the crime he committed was a political one in nature, then Hong Kong government may reserve the right not to hand him over to the United States government. That may be buoyed by the fact that Snowden claims that he was acting to help the citizens of Hong Kong, in part because he helped release the news that the United States was hacking into the routers and collecting massive amounts of data from Hong Kong research institutions, universities, civilian institutions, and hundreds of citizens of Hong Kong came out to protest the idea of his extradition outside the United States consulate in Hong Kong. Of course, at the end of the day, it's the government of the mainland China, which technically does have the final say on these matters, that will probably have the final say if they want to intervene in this matter. Of course, Snowden is seeking asylum in Iceland, and we do have news that the folks at the organization WikiLeaks, through Julian Assange, who's holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in the United Kingdom, are trying to help him get that asylum and help negotiate that with the Icelandic government. An Icelandic businessman, Olafur Vignir Sigurvinsson, who is close to WikiLeaks, has said that he has a private plane waiting to leave for Hong Kong to take him to Iceland. We'll keep you updated on these developments as they occur. It is fascinating stuff. Earlier in the week, President Obama finally, it seemed, addressed the issues at stake in this NSA scandal at length in a lengthy interview with Charlie Rose. Now, I think that it's important to know that there are essentially three components of the public debate that occurred this week and has been ongoing surrounding the NSA leak. The first one is, of course, the legality and constitutionality of these kinds of surveillance measures, these massive, non-discriminating metadata collections, either through phone records or on the internet. And the second thing is the extent to which these things improve our security, our national security, and are essential to foiling terrorist plots. And the third question is, of course, whether our elected leaders are acting in good faith and can be trusted to manage these affairs. And I'll take these one by one. First off, the president in his interview with Charlie Rose attempted to explain exactly the legal justification for these programs, and he noted that the massive collection of phone records for more than half of all Americans by the National Security Agency is justified by Section 215 of the Patriot Act, laws that Congress passed. But he said it's important to note that if someone wants to query some of this metadata, some of these phone records, then they still need a warrant, though those phone records are all available in the database. Here's how he put it.
Point number one, if you're a U.S. person, then NSA is not listening to your phone calls, and it's not targeting your emails unless it's getting an individualized court order.
Now, of course, the president pointed out that the government, in theory, perhaps does have the technical power to listen to your phone calls without a warrant, or to in fact query that metadata without a specific warrant, but to do so would be illegal.
It is transparent. That's why we set up the FISA court.
Of course, he was pointing out that all of these court orders, that none of this metadata can be summoned without a specific court order for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act courts, these secret courts that provide our intelligence agencies with the legal authority that they need. Now, of course, he was pointing out it is transparent. That's why we have the FISA court. But the FISA courts are completely non-transparent. We have no idea exactly how they work. And of course, they're not subject to the normal scrutiny that a traditional judicial court would be subject to. The president did point out to Charlie Rose that he is taking actions to make these systems more transparent. He specifically said that he would like to declassify the ways in which these decisions are made in order for more Americans to have confidence that these FISA courts are operating in good faith with the best interests of Americans at heart. Here's how he put it.
What I've asked the intelligence community to do is see how much of this we can declassify without further compromising the program, number one.
And of course, he also said that he would appoint a civilian board to oversee the civil liberties aspects of this to make sure that the government was in compliance with that.
Number two, I've stood up a privacy and civil liberties oversight board made up of independent citizens, including some fierce civil libertarians.
Now, in a Q&A conducted through The Guardian earlier this week, Edward Snowden made the point that just because there are policies in place that prevent some of these abuses of power, it does not mean that that these abuses of power are not extremely possible and extremely liable to occur, because technically they are possible, and anyone, particularly a systems administrator, and many of these people that have security clearance, could access this metadata so long as they have access to that database. Just because there is a policy against them, it does not mean that there's an enforcement mechanism against it. Now, back in 2006, this was unearthed this past week as well, that then Senator Joe Biden, back in 2006, stated, and this is, again, sound element 8, not 7, but sound element 8, Joe Biden said that it doesn't matter if it's metadata, if it's phone records and not the data itself. This is something that potentially violates the Fourth Amendment, the right to privacy unless there is a warrant. And he said that it's something that Congress should investigate. This is something that people are using to point out that the administration may be hypocritical here. Here's how Biden put it.
If it's true that 200 million Americans' phone calls were monitored in terms of not listening to what they said, right, but to whom they spoke and who spoke to them, I don't know. That's the Congress should investigate this.
Moving on to the security component of this debate, General Keith Alexander, who's in charge of the National Security Agency, testified before Congress about just how many terrorist plots this kind of monitoring, this kind of massive surveillance on the massive data collection, metadata collection in terms of phone records, in terms of internet as well, how many terrorist plots it foiled. He did say, he didn't have an exact number, but he did say it foiled dozens of plots. Again, this is sound element 9.
Of terrorist events that these have helped prevent.
got cut off a little bit there, but initially he said dozens of terrorist events. And specifically the event that he's pointing to, and many other elected officials are pointing to, of course he's not elected, but many elected officials are pointing to, is the foiling of a plot in 2009 by Najibullah Zazi, an Afghan-American cab driver from Aurora, Colorado, who was planning to bomb the New York City subway system. And in fact, President Obama even mentioned that in the Charlie Rose interview. Here's what Obama said.
The one thing people should understand about all these programs, though, is they have disrupted plots, not just here in the United States, but overseas as well. You know, you've got a guy like Najibullah Zazi.
And of course, as many analysts have pointed out, including folks at the Associated Press, Matt Apuzzo, is that, in fact, the Zazi plot, the United States government was already monitoring him, had already, in fact, even had him in detention at some point, had tried to, and so they would have had the authority to issue a warrant on him without this kind of legal authority. This was not the kind of legal authority that they needed to even tap his phone so much, because he was already connected to someone who had been detained. He'd already engaged in suspicious activity. That this was not something that this was not legal authority that they needed. This kind of metadata sweeping powers of surveillance was not something they needed. Finally, in terms of the issue of good faith of the intelligence community leaders and our elected officials, of course, we mentioned last week and we mentioned before the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, it appears lied under oath to Congress about these programs, claiming earlier in response to a question by a Democratic Senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden, that the government was not collecting data on millions of Americans. He then walked that back, of course, not exactly, but essentially he lied to Congress. Here was General Keith Alexander from National Security Agency, once again speaking to Congress in response to a question by Congressman Mike Rogers, he's the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, essentially saying that the government does not have the authority to wiretap anybody without a warrant exactly. Listen carefully to what he had to say.
Is the NSA have the ability to listen to Americans' phone calls or read their emails under these two programs?
No, we do not have that authority.
Of course, as Shep Smith pointed out on Fox News, the question was whether the NSA has the ability to listen to the actual data, the actual content of the emails, or the content of the phone calls themselves, not whether they have the authority to do it. And of course, the NSA chief skirted the answer by giving another answer by saying that they don't have the authority, not saying whether they have the ability or not. Now, I don't know whether they have the ability or not. I suspect that they might, but the fact of the matter is that when you have James Clapper lying to Congress, the Director of National Intelligence, and now General Keith Alexander, the head of the National Security Agency, skirting an answer, and you have a member of Congress who's supposedly in charge of the oversight, not holding him to it, then it doesn't inspire confidence in the good faith of our leaders that we can trust them to at least be honest with us about the things that are going on in this country. And I would say that this also points to the things that Edward Snowden pointed out in his Q&A with The Guardian earlier, which is that authority, matters of policy, have nothing to do with ability, once again. And I would also point out that if the issue here, in terms of the actual leaker himself, is that he compromised our security, of which there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever, then all of these responses are only validating his need to have exposed this, because they're telling us that we can't trust our elected leaders to be transparent with us. We can't trust our elected leaders to conduct oversight on the intelligence agencies. And even President Obama admitting that he's now going to engage in these reforms, as tepid as they may seem, of declassifying more information where possible, and appointing the Civil Liberties Board, are essentially saying this man, Edward Snowden, did a public service, that he has opened this debate, that he has made the system more transparent, that he has made the system better, that elected officials are responding to it, and yet now they're bringing the hammer down on the law against him. He's the seventh leaker that the Obama administration is pursuing, and pursuing it under the Espionage Act, which, as Glenn Greenwald points out, is dubious given that he's not sold these secrets to a foreign government. You decide, but I think this is shameful stuff and only vindicating Snowden further, regardless of what you think of the policy merits of these particular NSA programs. We're going to be following this debate closely and keeping you updated. When Take Action News continues, we're going to talk to Dave Zirin about some of the social unrest in Brazil ahead of the 2014 World Cup. You're going to want to see this, so stay tuned.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is, of course, Daniel Marin's guest hosting once again this week, Saturday, June 22nd, 2013. It seems the protest movements that we've seen take place in many major cities in emerging middle-class countries around the world have now spread to Brazil, a country that is hosting the 2014 Soccer World Cup and, of course, the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. Joining me now to discuss this social unrest protest movement is Dave Zirin. He's the sports editor at The Nation and a favorite guest, I should say, on Take Action News. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, hey, great to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Dave, what is going on in Brazil right now? We saw over 1 million people on the streets in that country, some of the biggest protests in perhaps decades.
I mean, starting point is just for listeners to get a framework in their minds that Brazil is a country that's larger than the continental United States. It's got 200 million people. And while these protests are nationwide, they have different character in each city. So it's hard to talk about a Brazil protest movement because the protests themselves have become kind of a catch-all for everything under the sun, a catch-all for frustration at poor public services, poor health care, poor education, and the fact that billions of dollars are going to the World Cup and the Olympics while people have these real concerns. Now, in different cities, it takes on different political characters. In some cities, the right wing of Brazil are attempting to use it as a way to return to prominence and relevance after really decades in the dark. In other cities, it's got a much different kind of character to it. But the one thing that binds them all is this idea of people saying, you know what, we have felt shut out for too long. We're now going to step up and have our voices be heard.
One of the most interesting things that you reported on is that the famous Brazilian soccer star Pelé of years past has essentially said, go home, and thrown in his lot with the establishment. What do you make of that?
Well, and then he had to backtrack on that, too. I mean, first of all, Pelé throwing in his lot with the establishment, that shouldn't be surprising. I mean, he's somebody who for decades has never failed to take money to stand with a dictator, if that's what it took. Or, I mean, they even parodied that on The Simpsons in the 1990s. If you might remember their soccer episode of, like, I hereby show up to endorse this product, and they hand him just a bag of money with a dollar sign on it. So that's less surprising. What is far more surprising, and it says something so much about our media culture in the 21st century, that Pelé got a lot of crap for it. And he didn't just get crap. I mean, it was social media. Some person, like the quote that I like so much is one person who said, if Pelé is the king, because people call him the king because of soccer, his soccer skills, if Pelé is the king, then just call me a Jacobin. Which, if you know anything about the French Revolution, that's pretty harsh.
That basically is like, I want to kill Pelé, in a way. I mean,
off with his head, It's saying off with, basically. I don't think this person actually meant physical harm to Pelé, but it's just making the point that, no, we're not going to accept the same old crap. But because of social media and the kind of outrage that it provoked on social media, Pelé backtracked and said, no, I stand with the protesters as long as they're not violent, which is not dissimilar from what's now become the kind of mainstream line in Brazilian politics. And it should sound very familiar to people in the United States who've been part of protest movements. You know, focus on the small minority of people who have like broken windows. Don't focus at all on police violence and the gassing of protesters. I mean, I know someone who lost a finger in Rio 2 nights ago because one of the glass canisters exploded right at their feet, these gas bombs they're shooting into the crowd. So no mention of that by Pelé, no mention of that by the Workers' Party, the ruling party of Brazil, but a lot of mention of, we hear you, now please don't blame soccer for this.
Dave, you compared this to some of the unrest back in 1968 in Mexico City. What are some of the similarities? What are the differences? And for folks who particularly don't remember that era.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, there had been a protest movement in the streets made up of thousands of workers and students, and hundreds of them were killed the week before the opening of the Olympic Games in what's known as the massacre of Tlatelolco Square, and in the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Mexico City. Really one of the most horrific slaughters that we've seen over the last 50 years in the Western Hemisphere was right before the Olympics. And the main similarity, there are two really critical similarities between Mexico City 68 and Brazil today. The first is that the spine of the protesters in Mexico City, like in Brazil, they're often referred to as students, as if that means they're middle class.
Dave, unfortunately, I got to wrap it up mid-thought. I'm sorry we had you for such a short period, but here we're going to keep following your stuff, and I recommend everyone read Dave Zirin, Edge of Sports on Twitter for more information on this. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
No worries, Dave.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor. A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around.
Colon cancer almost always starts with the polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh? I didn't even see you guys there.
Get the test, get the polyp,
I want to talk to my lawyer!
get the cure.
I got a phone call!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins once again in the guest host chair this Saturday, June 22nd, 2013. A do-nothing Congress? You might think so by the number of bills that they have passed. But at least in the House of Representatives, where the Tea Party Republicans took power in 2010 and remain in power, albeit with a slightly smaller majority, that changed a little bit this week, and that they finally passed a major bill. Of course, it's a major bill that's going nowhere, that's unconstitutional, and that violates a woman's right to choose. And that is a bill that was banning abortion after 20 weeks. Joining me now to talk about this and other aspects of the war on women, which is real, Addie Stan, the senior Washington correspondent for RH Reality Check. Addie, thanks so much for joining us in studio.
So much for having me, Daniel.
Addie, I've been following your stuff for a long time at Alternet and elsewhere, and so it's really great to have you here. This debate took some weird turns on the Republican side, and we're going to play some sound elements that I want folks to listen carefully to. And that is, initially, it started with what we thought was sort of the height of Republican ignorance, in that we had a Representative Trent Franks, and this is sound element 13, saying that So a little bit of background, right? Roe versus Wade says that you can't ban this stuff until the fetus is viable,
right?
And that is generally considered to be, I don't know what is that considered to be?
Usually around 24 weeks past fertilization.
Okay. And so that, in that case, then it's up to the states at that point in some cases, but there always still has to be an exception for the health of the mother and rape and incest.
Right.
Well, so Congressman Trent Franks was essentially saying, well, they're trying to make this all about rape and incest, but women basically don't get pregnant from rape. Everybody knows that. And the little Todd Aiken redux. Here's what Trent Franks said. We have sound of that.
Incidence of rape and resulting in pregnancy are very low.
That's not true, is it?
Well, no. I mean, there were an estimated 31,000 pregnancies as the result of rape last year, I believe it was, or maybe it was the year before, the latest stats that we have. So, it depends on what your idea of low is, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, Daniel, I mean, it's just that when Trent Franks made those remarks, which weren't quite the same as Aiken's, which is what the right is focused on. Well, he didn't say a woman's body kind of has a way of shutting that thing down, right? He didn't say that. But it was so...
He didn't say it's impossible. He just said it's really rare.
He said it's really rare, and basically I don't care if you do. I mean, that's basically what he's saying. Well, it's so low that for those who are stuck in that unfortunate situation, too freaking bad. I mean, that's basically what he said. And it was so evocative of the comments of Aiken, and so evocative of the comments of Richard Murdoch, who ran for Senate in Indiana, who said, it was part of God's plan if a woman is impregnated through rape, that, they had to scramble to kind of try to fix that.
Oh my God. So basically he's like slightly less of an idiot than Aiken and a lot more of a jerk.
That's one way to, I'll leave it for you to decide.
Because, I mean, at least if you think a woman's body is a way of shutting it down, then you're not really protecting against any real phenomenon. If you admit it exists, but it's 31,000 people, throw them under the bus.
Whatever.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and this took an even weirder turn, because later on in the hearings and sort of the debate over this bill, Representative Michael Burgess from Texas, who's an OBGYN, apparently. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't send my...
Very scary.
So he apparently said that he thinks that the threshold should have been actually 15 weeks, because that's when babies start feeling pleasure and pain. And specifically, he used the proof of a certain kind of pleasure. Here's how he described it.
It's very surprising to accuse somebody of espionage.
I'm sorry, this is sound element 14.
Who hasn't worked for a foreign government, who didn't covertly pass information to an adversary enemy of the United States.
Our fetus is passing covert information to foreign governments.
I guess we missed the sound there. I must have, but essentially what he said that if it's a male baby, they're touching themselves at that age, and so they can. He didn't actually say masturbating fetus, though. That's kind of, it would be nice if he had, but.
I think he got the idea across quite well.
Well, what I'm wondering is, first of all, medically, I want to get this straight. Medically, is this true? And isn't this a little bit discriminatory? I mean, this isn't just a classic case of discrimination against female masturbation, too? Like, why aren't women babies doing this? I feel like we just have this stigma against women's sexuality.
I think there's all of that wrapped into this, Daniel. I mean, as absurd as it is to say, I think it's all a piece of it, plus this sort of emotional attachment to this emotional response to sonograms that you see a lot on the right. So what Burgess actually said was that, he had seen in his practice, he had seen sonograms of 15-week fetuses, and if it's a male fetus, sometimes they have their hand between their legs. And if they can feel pleasure, why is it such a far stretch to believe they could feel pain? Well, first of all, there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that that fetuses feel pain at even 20 weeks, as the Republicans are asserting. That's all based on one study that is much disputed, a study by a guy named Dr. Sunny Anand. But at 15 weeks, 16 weeks, as Jody Jacobson, my esteemed boss and colleague, told me, the genitals aren't even fully formed. I mean, the bones are just beginning to form. So the notion that the fetus, because it has its hands between its legs, is masturbating is a little bit of a stretch. Maybe the good congressman is thinking about what he might be doing if he was in that curled up position. But, to the fetus, it might be just like, hey, here's a place to put my hand. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's like
that seems more plausible. It's funny to me to think. I mean, we don't think that children are. Children at young ages. I don't really know, but it seems like they're not even really doing that in the same.
Not until like they're a year or so, usually.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
It was just sort of astonishing, and yes, the notion that it was only a male fetus. That if fetuses were masturbating, of course, it would only be male fetuses that
Pigs.
would do that, because if a female fetus did that, you'd have a moral panic. And
That's
I
right.
mean, it was just all of the right-wing tropes, Daniel, rolled up into one, delicious soundbite. And this was in a Rules Committee hearing. This wasn't even during the debate on the bill. It was like the reason I got this scoop was because this committee was considered so insignificant that no reporters were there. And it was just unbelievable.
We're talking with Addie Stan. She's the senior Washington correspondent for RH Reality Check. You can check her stuff out at rhrealitycheck.org. And, of course, follow her on Twitter at Addie Stan. And it is a scoop. I think it's very we should thank you for getting that and paying attention to these obscure committees. In terms of the policy implications of this, obviously it's going nowhere. The Senate's probably not even going to take it up. But we're seeing this increasing push, particularly after the Gosnell trial, that this was someone who was doing late-term abortions, and in many cases they were illegal under Pennsylvania state law.
Right.
And obviously there were tremendous abuses there, and he's now going away.
He's a criminal.
Yeah, he's
he
going
had an
to,
illegal clinic, and he's a criminal. I mean, that's the bottom line,
Absolutely. But the right-wing sort of anti-abortion rights movement, I'm trying to use that phrase rather than go completely what I feel, which is the anti-choice movement.
Anti-woman movement.
Anti-women's rights movement. Anti-human rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that men have a stake in it as well.
That's right.
The pro-choice movement. But the right wing really sees an opening here. You've reported on that. That's what they're saying behind closed doors in these conferences. Should we be afraid? I mean, is this going to gain any traction? Because some of this late-term abortion stuff, the public is a little bit ambivalent about it, or they have weird notions about it.
I think that's right. And I think that we would be, I think those of us who are pro-choice and progressive would, it behooves us to pay attention to this stuff. There's a reason they did this, even though they know they can't pass it in this Congress. And that's because the grandstanding, they believe, will, and the airtime that they got to advance their tropes, some might say lies, will play in their favor, especially on the heels of Gosnell. Now, yes, I was covering last week Ralph Reed, formerly the director of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, formerly implicated in the Abramoff scandal. He had his Faith and Freedom Coalition come to Washington, and on that stage, former Republican Congresswoman, well, she's still a Republican, Marilyn Musgrave, who now works with the ironically named Susan B. Anthony List, which is a anti-choice group, said, that the Gosnell trial with all of its gruesome details presented for the anti-choice movement, a moment such as they have not seen in their lifetimes, and that they need to seize it. And that's exactly what they're doing by trying to conflate all abortion with Gosnell's practices. And we know that there is no relationship. I mean, what Gosnell was doing is already illegal, right? It's already illegal. And the guy is serving murder sentences. But as long as they can, look, nobody feels like really great about abortion, right? And there are aspects of it that are kind of icky. So, and there's really, there are real moral questions that people have to answer for themselves. So the more you can plant those seeds of doubt, the more you plant the more you pave the way for what's taking place in the states right now, where these kinds of measures are being brought up in the states, such as Texas, just this last week. And, it really creates a hostile environment for women.
It's such a good point, Addie. I think it's really tragic that sort of a real case of criminal murder and negligence by one doctor would be so shamelessly exploited to restrict women's rights. And if you're interested in this issue and in this cause, I encourage you all to read Addie's stuff at RH Reality Check, rhrealitycheck.org, and follow Addie on Twitter at AddieStan. Addie, we're going to take a quick break, but when we continue, I want to get your take on the new rules or attempt to take military sexual assault out of the chain of command that did fail in committee in the Senate, and what other, perhaps more modest reforms we might win out of this fight. So stay tuned when Take Action News continues after this.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on healthcare while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is guest host Daniel Marins, executive producer of Take Action News this Saturday, June 22nd, 2013. Continuing our discussion in studio is Addie Stan, the senior Washington correspondent for RH Reality Check, rhrealitycheck.org. You can follow Addie on Twitter at Addie Stan. There was news earlier this week in that it looks like Senator Carl Levin, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, basically helped strike down a measure that was being driven by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, another Democratic senator, that would have removed the issues of the authority to strike down, to prosecute sexual assault, to determine whether it was worthy of civilian prosecution or as the case may be, from the military chain of command. Obviously, it has been revealed in recent months that there's epidemic levels of sexual assault in the military, and that there have been efforts for years to conceal that. And in fact, the military's own man in charge of sort of overseeing the issue of sexual assault had himself been accused of sexual assault.
Yeah, that's the Air Force guy, yeah.
I mean, it's, you kind of might have, to sort of, the trust meter is low.
Yeah, pretty low.
So that's kind of why advocates working with people like Senator Gillibrand have been so insistent that this be taken out of the chain of command. What do people need, first, Addie, what do people need to know about the status quo? What authority do military officers have to keep this from coming to light?
Well, what the commanders, the way that this works. Now, there apparently are a number of different ways for people who have been assaulted by their comrades in the military to report it, but they're not really aware of it. And the natural thing to do is you report it to the guy who's in charge of your unit, and then it keeps getting pushed up the chain, right? The problem is, Daniel, is that usually the people who are attacked by people who have higher rank. And when you take that into the chain of command, these victims are usually either not believed or they're threatened. And there's incredible history of retaliation against people who report having been assaulted, especially by people of higher rank. So, I mean, the latest Pentagon report released just in May suggested a 37% uptick in estimated unwanted sexual contacts. Those aren't all classified as assaults, but it's still pretty telling of what's going on there. And so the other thing that these commanders can do, it's not just about referring to civilian courts, it's about referring it to a court-martial. There are non-judicial punishments that they can take that don't take it to the level of a court-martial. So they decide whether or not to refer it to a court-martial, which is the military's own justice system. And then once the court-martial, which is kind of a jury, renders its judgment, whoever is in charge of that, in command, can overturn it. And that's happened in two high-profile cases just in the last year or so.
So you've sold me on it. You've sold me, and I think most reasonable people, that these military commanders, that their built-in incentives, given the power structure there,
Right.
for them to sort of treat this with impunity, for them to
Right.
not prosecute this. They have a proven record of not prosecuting it, and there's a rampant
Right, they're not
rampant
controlling
sexual,
it, right.
Exactly, and so under any normal circumstance, everyone would basically say, I mean, we think about other institutions where this has occurred. I think about, for instance, I know that in New York there are cases where I think the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community has issues there where they don't want to hand over people to civilian authorities, and the city was just like, "Screw you guys!
Forget about it."
You've got a problem,
Right.
and we're stepping in here." And yet, Carl Levin, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, helped vote this down.
Right.
And
he led the charge against it.
He led the charge against it, and apparently there was it was not, I think Claire McCaskill sided with him, if I'm
That's
not
right.
mistaken, and then some Republicans like Ted Cruz sided with Gillibrand. I mean, it's
Right.
like,
It's
this
kinda
was totally
crazy-making.
bipartisan. Is it as straightforward as who's in bed with the military and the military contractors?
Yeah, I do believe that. I haven't done the due diligence to be able to assert who's in bed with the military contractors, but I do think that there is this sort of kind of cowardliness on the part of many lawmakers about challenging the military. And I dare say, even the President of the United States, because you know what, Daniel?
I'm shocked.
If President Obama, when he gave his speech to to the Naval Academy, if he had, in that speech in which he said, "Oh, we need to end this. There's no place for this military sexual assault, this sexual assault culture in our military," if he had said in that speech or elsewhere that he supported removing the adjudication of these crimes from the chain of command, it would have happened. It would have happened, and that's all it would have taken. And it's really time for the president, I believe. This is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of my employer, but my personal opinion is it's really time for the president to take leadership on this. He has 2 daughters. Think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I completely agree, and I think that I wish that the president did exercise leadership in this regard. It's something we're going to be paying attention to closely, very, very closely, in the weeks and months ahead. And I mean, it's just such a common sense issue. I understand that politicians feel uncomfortable. They think that their national security credentials are going to be questioned.
Here's the thing, right? We always, what is considered sort of the most macho military in the world? The Israeli military, right? They took these crimes out of the chain of command. The UK has taken these out of the chain of command. Australia, Germany, Canada, and what do all of these countries have in common? Oh, they're U.S. allies. It seems to be working for them. In fact, reports of sexual assaults in the military in Israel went up by 80% once they made this change.
Which suggests that they were going unreported before.
That's right, as
and
they
certainly,
are here.
and I think it's so important that we make this clear. Obviously, regardless of sort of the moral implications of various activities of these militaries that I know are controversial and don't want to go down that rabbit hole just in a moment. But Israel has women in combat, for instance, and I know that now we have women in combat in unprecedented ways.
And a lot of people don't like that, by the way.
Well, exactly, and I think it's really unfortunate that people would make this about that they would make this about women in combat. We know that our women need to be, it improves our armed services, and we just need accountability for this. It needs to be taken out of the chain of command. Addie Stan, thank you so much for joining us. You've informed us on these issues so well, and I encourage everyone to follow your excellent journalism.
It's great to be here, Daniel. Thank you.
When Take Action News continues, we have an amazing hour ahead of us. We're going to be talking to Kalpona Akhtar, the Executive Director of the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, in just a few minutes, so stay tuned.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
Welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, once again guest hosting this Saturday, June 22nd, 2013. Fascinating stuff going on across the country today. In just a few moments, we're going to be talking with Kalpona Akhtar. She is the executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity. She's a former worker in a sweatshop in Bangladesh where she earns some $6 a month. Incredible. For 450 hours of work. She's leading the charge for greater workplace safety there, greater workers' rights, everything like that. Really, really important stuff, and I want to make sure that we get her on the line. It's tough to make these international calls, folks. But I'm going to be talking a little bit about, in just these first 6 minutes, once again, I want to... There was an issue that came up this week. We were talking a little bit about the women's rights issues of War on Women with Addie Stan. Fascinating stuff. Really important to follow her on Twitter and read her stuff at rhrealitycheck.org. There was another matter that drew the attention of many feminist writers and feminist advocates this week, and that is the issue of the Miss America contest. And that is that Miss Utah, who was one of the runners-up in this contest this week, said was asked as part of the Miss USA beauty pageant, quote, "A recent report shows that in 40% of American families with children, women are the primary earners, yet they continue to earn less than men. What does this say about society?" She said, "I think we can relate this back to education and how we are continuing to try to strive to figure out how to create jobs right now. That is the biggest problem, and I think especially the men are seen as the leaders of this, and so we need to try and figure out how to create education better so we can solve this problem." So these are, look, basically her answer was education. Yeah, education. Men are good at education, they're earning more. Now, this went viral across the internet as kind of like, ha, another Miss America pageant candidate who is a dumb bimbo and is pretty. Well, I mean, that's kind of sexist in its own right, first of all. Second of all, how many people would give a coherent answer to that if asked on the spot on live national television? It's completely ridiculous. To expect someone who's not a policy expert to be able to answer that intelligently is ridiculous. I think Bryce Cover really wrote the most important article on this in Think Progress. She's the economic policy editor at Think Progress. She said that, look, the causes of this are complicated, a little bit at least. A lot of it's discrimination, a lot of it's wage discrimination. A lot of it's the fact that we're looking at single mothers that are struggling and to as primary breadwinners for these families, that are struggling to provide for their families, and that perhaps... And we need to look at it that way. So, I mean, she talks about the fact that according to a Pew report, of these 40% of families that are relying on women's wages, we're really looking at women who make more than their husbands and single mothers. And single moms account for 2/3 of those women. Now, they don't just earn less than men, as I was saying, they earn less than married women in a lot of these cases because of the wage gap, because of discrimination, but also because there's not a lot of support for them. They need to take care of their kids. It's harder for them to pursue a higher education. We don't have an adequate child care program in this country. We don't have an adequate health care and after-school care program in this country. And so it's really also more about kind of the issues of economic equality, a security safety net support system in this country. And even for married women, there's an issue where women's wages begin to slow around age 30 and just about halts, their wage growth halts by age 39, and that mothers earn 5% less per hour per child than childless women. So what we're really talking about is discrimination against mothers in particular, across the board in this case. And of course, as I said earlier, the security and safety net available to single women. That's really, really hard to sum up in any kind of a short answer. I didn't know that exactly until Bryce Covert wrote about it. And the idea that we were mocking Miss Utah for not knowing how to say it properly, and what I think was kind of maybe a legitimate answer, at least an answer that's repeated often in the media in a lot of cases. And when you think about the fact that with single mothers there is issues with access to education, there was a grain of truth in that. And so I give credit to Miss Utah to making the best out of a bad situation, and shame on anyone who is trying to shame her. Coming up next, we're going to be talking with Kalpona Akhter when our syndicated stations join us. You are not going to want to miss this. Amazing interview, and a personal hero of mine, if I may say that. So stay tuned, and of course, subscribe to us on YouTube so you can catch us after the show, youtube.com/TakeActionNewsTV.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is guest host, executive producer Daniel Marins in the host chair once again this week, but for the last week, on this Saturday, June 22nd, 2013. Let's get right to it. On Take Action News, we've been giving you updates every week on the factory collapse at Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, which is now believed to be the largest workplace disaster in modern recorded history. It killed 1,127 people. It led to the creation of the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh, which some more than 18 multinational corporations signed up to an agreement guaranteeing $500,000 at least toward the repairs and workplace safety in each of the Bangladesh garment factories in Bangladesh because they benefit so much from it. Of course, there have been many holdouts, including the enormous retailers Walmart and Gap. The Bangladesh apparel industry has $19 billion in revenue and employs 4 million people. Joining us now is one of my personal heroes and hero to many, the leader of a movement within Bangladesh and across the world to make conditions in Bangladesh for Bangladeshi workers better, to create solidarity for these Bangladeshi workers. Kalpona Akhter, she's the executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity. Kalpona, thank you so much for joining us on Take Action News.
Hi, this is a pleasure to be joining this program.
Kalpona, you've been through an amazing struggle yourself as someone who worked in the sweatshops at a younger age. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But first off, I want to get your take. What are the next steps in this movement for solidarity with workers in Bangladesh to ensure that something like Rana Plaza never happens again?
We are doing a lot of, awareness raising programs and as much as meeting with the workers, so they can raise their voices to speak to their factory management that if the factory is unsafe, then they have right to say that no, it will not work. So that's one thing that we are working in here in the ground. And there is a factory which has been, very recently there is a crack found or through the inspection team, it's found that this factory is dangerous, and now we are working with that factory workers for about 500 to 4,000 workers working. So we are working with those workers to not to go to this factory.
I know that when the Rana Plaza factories did collapse, it was activists like yourself on the ground that helped identify Walmart brand Fame jeans amid the rubble. I also know that worker advocates in Bangladesh suffer tremendous threats of violence and intimidation. Someone like Aminul Islam was a worker advocate who was found dead with signs of torture. Do you fear for your life when you're doing this work with workers in Bangladeshi factories?
Honestly saying, Aminul was my colleague. Aminul was working for our center. So, truly saying, sometimes, yes, I do afraid. But when you see these death tolls, like Tajween, like Rana Plaza, they are more than my life. These people dying like hundreds. So that really tell me or give me a that tell me that I shouldn't be afraid. I shouldn't be just afraid about my life. It is it is more than my life that I need to do. So I'm not afraid, but sometimes I'm not afraid.
Do you think that the labor movement in Bangladesh, doing the kinds of things like you're doing, of talking with management, of talking with workers and trying to empower them, is there a future for the labor and union movement in Bangladesh? Will there be progress after this tremendous catastrophe?
This is, really a historical turning point. Okay, so every stakeholder should act right, and I believe, I'm kind of optimistic that these will make a change the labor movement in Bangladesh, and this will help to get a safe working space for our workers for in future.
Kalpona, you are obviously also working with organizations around the world to pressure people that work with suppliers in Bangladesh. You recently traveled to Arkansas to speak on behalf of a minority shareholder group at the Walmart stockholders meeting in Arkansas. And you delivered a very powerful message to the Walton family that owns Walmart, saying essentially, you are collectively worth $93 billion. Do you have it in your heart? Why don't you have it in your heart to at least sign on to this accord that would make you legally liable for the safety in these factories? How hard was that to do, and do you believe that that eventually we will be able to help move the needle on Walmart?
Yeah, it is not that that Walmart doesn't know what's happening in here. It is not that Walmart, would not know that their clothes were sourcing from Tajween or maybe or lately in Rana Plaza. So to be me in the shareholder meeting, there was two reasons. One of them were that one of them were that the 10% shareholders should have a right to call a special meeting, but the main reason was to let Walton or Walmart executives from a first hand in front of everyone, in front of media and everyone, know that what they're really doing here in the bottom of the supply chain. Like in the shareholder meeting, when they're cheering and making their face happy by telling that how much profit they made last year. On the other hand, they should know to making that profit, how many people they killed. And so my part was that I was able to address that issue, and of course position is not to embarrass them, but it is more like to tell them that how important it is for them to join in the accord. So that I tried to deliver my message in the shareholder meeting, and I hope many people understood that Walmart should do that. Even in that, after the shareholder meeting, many associates and others, they came to me and they said, "Yeah, you made the point." So people really understood that Walmart executives or Walton did not understand yet. So I think it is very crucial for them to sign this accord because the Walmart is the second largest apparel sourcer from Bangladesh.
I mean, it is very moving to hear that at least some associates and some of the shareholders did go up to you afterwards to say that you had a point and that you were right. I mean, the contrast there is so stark in terms of, Hugh Jackman singing at this shareholders event and you then going up and telling your story. It boggles the mind how some of these people sleep at night. I want to get your take in terms of other strategies. Do you think that there will be, we'll see, are there going to be continuing campaigns through institutional investors to pressure Walmart and these other retailers to sign on to this accord for safety in Bangladesh? I know that Canadian institutions representing some $44 billion in assets released a joint statement recently saying that they support the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh and timely and effective action to ensure respect for the fundamental human rights of workers and supply chains of the company in which they invest. But that was not a binding statement. That was not a statement saying we're not going to invest in these companies anymore, I don't believe. Is there going to be a movement to get large institutions, universities, unions, those kinds of things to divest from companies that have not signed on to this accord?
Yes. There are protests, and there will be protests by in front of their stores. Like we are doing protests here in Bangladesh, and there will be protests throughout the U.S. and Europe, of course. And, the organization like United Student Against Sweatshop, International Labor Rights Forum, and other union like Unite Here, AFL-CIO, Chance to Win, UFCW, everyone is coming together to do this protest. And as you know, there is an organization which has been made by Walmart Associate. It's called Our Walmart, or Walmart Warehouse Workers. Everyone is supportive to this accord, and these great activists, great folks, will keep doing this protest. And in coming days, I think there will be a global day of action. So.
That's so important that we make note of that, which is that on June 29th, there is an International Day of Action all across the country and across the world. And here in Washington, D.C., there's a gap on Connecticut Avenue that people are going to be protested, led by folks like United Students Against Sweatshops, some of us, and of course, you can find out more information about that at gapdeathtraps.com. Is there another place where people can go to find out information about opportunities to help take action, to help pressure these retailers?
There is always a online campaign. Like some of us and other organizations have online campaign documents. So the consumers should sign that and send it to the Gap and Walmart to tell them that how important it is to sign this accord to save these workers' lives. So, the consumers or the people in New York, they can go to the Herald Square where there will be big protests are going to plan by many groups. So it is really, really high time to raise voice from every corner, from every avenue to save the working place for our workers.
Kalpona, I'll tell you what, I have more questions for you, and I want to make sure that we get those in, and I don't want to shortchange this at all. So if you don't mind, I'd like to keep you on the line, and we're gonna cut to break. I'll have a few questions for you after a brief 4-minute break. I want to get your personal story. Can you do that?
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much. An amazing, amazing person, Kalpona Akhtar. And of course, folks, come out for that day of action, June 29th. That's next Saturday. Go to gapdeathtraps.com, someofus.com for more information about that. We're going to be giving you all the latest information on how you can take action. Take Action News continues. We continue our conversation with Kalpona Akhtar.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying free consultations at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/guardreserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is guest host, executive producer Daniel Marins this Saturday, June 22nd, 2013. We're continuing our conversation with Kalpona Akhtar, the executive director of the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity. Kalpona, before I get a little bit into sort of your personal story and how you came to this, I just want to ask you one more question about the efforts that you and organizations around the world, the international labor movement, are taking to improve conditions for workers in Bangladesh. And that is that in 2007, the AFL-CIO, one of the major labor federation in the United States, filed a petition with the United States Trade Representative to remove Bangladesh's preferential trade status with the United States until they got their act together in terms of workers' rights and workplace safety. The State Department, many people in the United States State Department are opposed to that. They think that it could harm relations with Bangladesh, and a more incremental approach is preferable. Do you favor efforts to remove Bangladesh's preferential trade status?
Yeah, I mean, when AFL-CIO has filed this petition, I think we were one of the organizations who was working on these. So it is also our call to, take action on these trade preferences, because these trade preferences did not help workers to improve their working condition or get better wages, or, rather things gone worse. Like, even after the filing this petition in back 2007, what we received, just last few months, workers got a tiny window open to get registration of their union. Beside of that, whenever workers raise their voices to increase the minimum wage, they have been threatened, beaten, fired. Being supporting workers' voice, our organization's registration has been revoked in back 2010. There is several different criminal charges has been brought against me and my colleagues. My colleagues was in prison for a month in back 2010, and we released after tremendous international pressure, but is still facing all those criminal charges. And then my colleague Aminul Islam killed. So, even this happened after the petition has filed by AFL. Then what would happening before this? So our organization was kind of supporting to take action against these trade preferences, and it's still there.
Kalpona, your personal story is actually tragic and represents sort of what so many people in Bangladesh have to go through, unfortunately, and that is that you did work in a sweatshop yourself from the ages of 12 to 20, making $6 a month for 450 hours of work. What was that like, and how did you emerge from there to become the executive director of this major organization on behalf of Bangladesh workers?
Yeah, I think this was a tough march. Definitely it wasn't my choice to go to the factory in that age of 12. I had to go to the factory to support my family because my father, he got ill. He was the primary earner in the family, and then there wasn't anyone who can support us. So first, me and my mom, we started working in the factory, and my mom was able to work like 6 months, and she had to quit because she has infant. My younger sister was just 2 months old, and after her, me and my 10.5-year-old brother, we was working in the factory and supporting our family. And as you said, yes, I was earning just $6 per month, being working more than over 450 hours. So, first few years, I really hadn't had any idea about law and rights, that there is a law to protect our rights, to pay us better, and treat us better. But I didn't know anything. So, as I don't know anything, I had to even work 23 days in a row in the sweatshop factory. being slapped by the supervisors, yelled by them for any minor mistake. And that is not only with me, that was with my co-workers who was working there. After a few years, we had a strike in our factory because our factory management wanted to give us less money for our overtime pay. And then we said it is not done, though we don't know the law, but we went for a strike, and we won our fight. But the impact became with that 20 of my coworkers got fired because they were among strikers. And these folks was looking for an organization where they can get help, and they found Solidarity Center, which is international wing for AFL-CIO. So this Solidarity Center was helping workers to know the law and rights. I mean, they were giving level of training, and in the same time, they were helping a group of workers to from the independent garment union. So my colleagues, they came in here and they came to know they can get help, and sue the factory owner, and they sued, and they came back to us and says, guys, you should come in this center because there is something that you should know. Then I came with them, and I spent 4 hours in that center, and that 4 hour really changed my life. This 4 hour, I got a training on labor law. I came to know what is law. I came to know there is a law which can protect our rights. I came to know that I can join union, and union can protect my rights. And literally, it was like second born for me. So then I started organizing union in my production floor, and it took like a year or so to have membership. And it, I can say proudly that out of 1,500 workers, almost 99% was union member. And we submitted the application to the government office for registration, which is law. We have to do that. But the government, they reject our application, and in the same time, I kicked out from the factory. I just fired. And then I sued the factory owner and the government as well in the labor court. And then I sued both of them in ILO Geneva for unfair labor practice because they violated ILO provision 87 and 98. So then they made my life miserable. I was working in other factories, but those factories keep firing me because I have been blacklisted by the factory owner. And then they blacklisted me, throughout the industry, so I didn't get job anywhere. And then I joined with the union called BIGOF, Bangladesh Independent Garment Workers Union. So I joined with them as a union organizer, and I was played in their board as well, working president and then education secretary. So that started my journey as a union organizer, and lately I joined with Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity in 2000. I'm one of the co-founder of this organization too. Since then, I'm working in here. So I think that is Marsha, I should say that how I came to, from a sewing machine helper to executive director of an organization.
It's an amazing and inspiring story, and one that I imagine is not easy to talk about, but at the end of the day, you've taken your story, you've taken your struggle and your triumph over these forces for your rights as a human being, and you haven't turned your back and just said, okay, I'm free, great. You're now working to bring those liberties, those freedoms, those rights to other people. And for that, I think we all honor you and thank you. And I encourage everyone to follow your work, to go to gapdeathtraps.com to sign on to the Day of Action on June 29th. All across the world. And to get more involved, look up Solidarity Center, look up United Students Against Sweatshops, look up Kalpona Akhtar, the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity. Kalpona, thank you so much for joining us today on Take Action News. This has truly been an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me in here. Our fight do not end in here. We need to keep fighting to have a safe working place. So please, everyone, join in the 29th Global Campaign against Gap and Walmart. Thank you.
You heard it from someone who can't tell it any better, folks. Join this campaign to hold Gap and Walmart accountable for the human rights of people like Kalpona. Take Action News continues. We're going to return a little bit to the United States and Congress and what's going on there, the farm bill that failed. Talking with Charlie Mitchell. Take Action News continues after this.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is guest host Daniel Marins, executive producer, in the host chair this week again. We're talking with Charlie Mitchell. He's our congressional correspondent for Take Action News. And of course, it's very important to note that all of the amazing Legion followers of Charlie Mitchell, his new Twitter handle is Charlie Reports. Charlie Reports. So, Charlie, thanks for joining us.
Be here, Daniel.
Charlie, the Farm Bill in the House went down in flames this week, with many Republicans joining with a majority of the Democrats. I know the Democrats were upset about those $20 billion in food stamp cuts that would have knocked 2 million people off the rolls. What's the deal with the Republicans?
Well, I'll tell you, Daniel, this was a very difficult formula that Speaker Boehner had put together for moving this bill. It had $20 billion in cuts in food stamps, as you said, which he thought would be enough to get conservatives on board. But the fact was that it wasn't enough to get his conservative flank to embrace this bill. They didn't feel that the cuts went deep enough or the reforms were profound enough. And on the other side, $20 billion in food assistance reductions guaranteed that you were going to get very few Democratic votes. So the math was always very, very sketchy on this to begin with, but there was a tacit understanding. This bill came out of the House Agriculture Committee. The ranking Democrat on that committee is a guy from Minnesota named Colin Peterson. He's a very conservative Democrat. He negotiated this bill. There were a handful of Democrats who would support it, but as the bill moved across the floor, this kind of tacit understanding that the House Democratic leadership wouldn't really actively whip against the bill. They were kind of the opinion, let this thing pass, we'll go to the Senate and have a conference with the Senate. The negotiated bill that comes back will be much better. They opposed it, they didn't like it, but they weren't going to the mats to block the thing. But as it moved across the House floor, from the Democratic perspective, it got worse and worse and worse. There were drug testing requirements added for people who were on food stamps. There was a requirement that you have to be in job training before you can get food stamps, and it just kept
and no funding for that job training.
Sure. That's the trick of the thing, that you put in these requirements, but then you don't actually create the program. So somebody, is facing a requirement to be in a job training program that doesn't exist before they can get access to food stamps. So that rubbed a lot of Democrats the wrong way, as you can imagine. And Peterson, the Agriculture Committee Democrat, he went to the Republicans during the floor debate and he said, you're losing the few guys of mine who you had. They're not going to support this thing. And then the kicker to the whole thing was after they kept adding these provisions to it. Okay, they have this bill that had all of these provisions that were considered to be very noxious to the Democrats. At that point, 62 Republicans still voted against it, and that sank the thing. They got very few Democratic votes. A quarter of the Republican conference voted against it, and so it was sunk. And there were a lot of recriminations on the House floor on Thursday after this went on. The Democratic Minority Whip Steny Hoyer said, "Listen, we're not taking any blame for this. We would have gotten you 40 votes for it, even though we didn't support it. Democrats would have produced 40 votes if you had have added all of these things and made it much, much more stringent." And he turned around and said, and you couldn't even control your own people. The Republican leadership, Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader Eric Cantor of Virginia, they moved very quickly. I give them credit for this on a political side, that they moved very quickly to blame the Democrats for the defeat. And, they didn't want to get into a dynamic where they were at odds with their own members who had basically sabotaged their bill, but they didn't want to blame their own members for that. So they got out there and very quickly said that they had been betrayed by the Democrats, and here we are. There's no farm bill. This, as you know, Daniel, this bill is historically a slam dunk. It's something that both sides strongly support, and it usually goes through with barely a ruffle, but now, again, I don't know where they go from here on this bill, but probably more significantly, I'm not sure where John Boehner goes from here with his leadership.
Well, Charlie Mitchell, our congressional expert on Take Action News, that is exactly where I was going to take this conversation next, which is this is just another leadership crisis for Speaker John Boehner. He can't wrangle his caucus. He can't get the hardcore Tea Party conservatives to vote for these bills. And so he's either got to do one of two things. He's either got to say, I'm just not going to pass these bills, do what he does with, I guess, the budget with these continuing resolutions and somehow find a way to appropriate the funds temporarily, or he's got to violate the so-called Hastert rule, which says that he needs a majority of the majority to put something up for a vote. But we've seen this before. It still seems like Speaker Boehner is safe in his speakership because there's just no one else who wants to be that guy.
Right. There has to be a legitimate contender who comes up and challenges him. And that's not going to happen this year. Everyone thinks that eventually Eric Cantor will be the guy who replaces him, but Cantor's made a calculation that he's not going to challenge Boehner head on, and he's actually been pretty tight with Boehner through these disasters, if you will. But I had a few takeaways in terms of Boehner's leadership of coming out of this vote, and I think they have a lot of implications for things like immigration reform. There's a sizable block of the Republican conference that really has no faith in government programs of any kind. It thinks that government is utterly incompetent, and it just won't vote for these things. It won't vote for the Farm Bill, which is a government program or supports government programs the Republicans have always supported. Now you have this element, this faction of the Republican Party that is so down on government that they won't even support that. Another thing is the spending, and they just do not want to spend money. And that sank this, that even though you had very deep cuts in this Farm Bill, it wasn't enough. And the third thing is that the conference obviously does not fear John Boehner. He does not have that kind of stick that a leader needs to get things done on occasion. And on the other side, they don't fear him, but they obviously don't trust his strategy either. And if he goes in and tells them, as he did, listen, this is smart politics for us, this is good governing for us, for a variety of reasons, they walk out of the room and it's like they heard nothing. They were utterly unpersuaded. So I think those things are what's going to make immigration reform all that much difficult to get across the finish line on the House side. I guess, he could bring an immigration bill to the floor that is just all about building fences and all of that, and maybe he can pass that, but by the same token, I think that, that would cost money too, so he would encounter a lot of opposition to the increased spending that would require.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Charlie. That's where all eyes are going to be on John Boehner right now, because we're seeing kind of relatively unprecedented bipartisanship on this immigration reform issue coming out of the Senate. We saw just a tremendous effort to get conservative votes in the Senate on comprehensive immigration reform, doubling the numbers of border security agents to 40,000 by adding 20,000 agents there. They're calling it a 5-point plan. So there's the border agent surge. There is the fact that they're going to build at least 700 miles more of fence. They're going to implement E-Verify. And a couple other really big border security components there that people won't get permanent resident status until they're completed, essentially. And they're hoping that will send this through the Senate with more than 70 votes. A lot of liberals like me are joking, well, you guys want to hire federal workers and give them good, union wages and benefits, and that's going to help the economy? Okay, we're fine with that in the name of border security. But as you point out, that's spending right there. Boehner has said that he'll bring this bill he's determined to help bring this bill through, but he's also said that he wants to obey the Hastert rule, majority of the majority. Is that...
I'm really, really curious to see over the next few days how that Senate formulation plays with the rank and file Republicans over on the House side. It's going to be really interesting. It hasn't been out there long enough for it to really sink in and for them to kind of weigh in on it heavily. But what greased this whole thing is the Congressional Budget Office this past week. They assess how much legislation will cost over a 10-year period. They found that the Senate bill would cut the deficit by $900 billion. That's what created the pot of money that allows them to put an extra $30 billion a year into border security, hiring all those people who you're talking about. And you know, you're right. From an economic standpoint, that's a lot of jobs, and that's a real government jobs program. So they get all of that deficit reduction, but I'm just very curious to see how the conservative members of the House look at spending an additional $300 billion on border security over 10 years, regardless of that $900 billion. You know, a lot of those folks would say, if this saves $900 billion, that should all go to deficit reduction. But, you know, the fact is that you're getting those savings by bringing people into the country, allowing them to be, normalized in their legal status, and allowing them ultimately to get on a pathway to citizenship. That's the thing that's creating this kind of quote-unquote economic bonanza, and conservative House members hate that idea. So,
it's such a good point. And the conundrums that John Boehner and the folks in leadership, and certainly Marco Rubio, who will be devastated if this does not go through, are tremendous, and we're going to be following it closely, and we're looking forward to your updates on a weekly basis. Charlie Mitchell, a veteran reporter, our congressional expert and correspondent for Take Action News, thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Daniel.
Coming up next on Take Action News, we're going to be talking to an opponent of a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. His name is Brian J. Fisher. He's the Director of Issue Analysis for the American Family Association. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war, and it was not a good idea, and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders and best in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is guest host Daniel Marins, executive producer, in the host chair today. The immigration debate has sparked off tremendous tension in the country between people that think that no one should be allowed on a path to citizenship and those who think that there should be some way to get them there if we've got 11 million people here already. One of those people who thinks that these people should self-deport is Brian J. Fisher. Brian's the director of issue analysis at the American Family Association. He's a radio and talk show host in Mississippi. Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Well, it looks like we may be having some issues hearing you, Brian, there, so we're going to try and iron those out before we continue. Of course, I think we're just having some technical issues right now with Brian, but I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with this immigration debate, some of the points that people are making out there in Congress, some of the conservatives that are hoping that we can get these folks on board, and that is that Marco Rubio is really leading this charge in the United States Senate. He's someone who's considered to have conservative credibility when he was elected as a senator back in 2010 as sort of a Tea Party senator. He's also the son of Cuban immigrants. Of course, that country had special immigration status back in for many years and continues to for the people that are defecting from there. He said that he understands conservatives' concerns about security, but that is why his working group in the Senate helped make border security an essential component of this bill. He talked about E-Verify. He talked about building 700 miles of additional fencing and hiring 20,000 border agents in what some are calling a border surge. Here's how Marco Rubio described his attempts to assuage conservatives and his understanding of their concerns. It's Sound Element 15.
Well, I understand why conservatives are upset. They've seen all these promises in the past that haven't been delivered. That's why we're saying that nobody can become a legal permanent resident of the United States unless these border measures pass, all 5 of them.
Brian Fisher, if we've got you on the line right now, those assurances aren't enough for you, are they?
Well, absolutely not, Daniel, for one simple reason. We believe that the border must be secured first. Not enough just to have a plan, secure the border.
We got
enough just
Brian,
to have
are those assurances enough for you?
We got that in 1986. We granted instant legalization to 3 million illegal aliens with the promise of border security. We got the amnesty. We got no border security. We're not dumb enough to fall for that trick again. We must have the border secured and verified before anything else is done.
But Brian, they're essentially saying that they're gonna double these numbers of border agents. They're gonna build that fence. They're gonna do all of these things that conservatives want. I mean, at least even from a pragmatic perspective, you think that you're gonna get a better deal than this?
Oh, sure, we can get a better deal than that. That's no different than the deal they promised us in 1986. They still would grant legalization first. Then they would go to work on expanding borders.
But in Congress, I mean, are you going to get a more conservative Congress, a more conservative House of Representatives, a more conservative group in the Senate than this? Come around 2 years if this fails, 4 years if this fails. Are you really going to get a better deal than this?
Well, the problem right now is that we've got perfectly good laws regarding immigration. They're simply not being enforced. If we simply enforced the immigration laws that we have on the books right now, that would be sufficient to control the problem. We have an administration that's not serious about enforcing the law.
They've deported more people than the Bush administration. Is that not serious?
There's no reason to think that this administration would enforce new laws that were put into place, no matter how good they were.
But you don't deny that they've deported more undocumented immigrants than the Bush administration, do you?
That the Obama administration has?
Absolutely, 2 million people.
Oh, yeah, it's been a flood of illegal aliens coming in.
No, that's deportations. That's deportations out of the country.
Well, you got a lot of people that are just simply going home because the American economy is so
Right.
bad.
I'm talking about actual deportations, though. Okay, so you don't think that the Obama administration's made progress on border security?
If they actually were deporting that many people, Daniel, the left would be up in arms. They would.
They are. They're protesting. I was at the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, and there were people marching, shame on President Obama. But actually, the left understands that it has relatively limited options given some of the power there, and they're actually trying to be pragmatic. But they are extremely upset about it, just for the record. And then that's why they push for the DREAM Act. But Brian, I want to move on. Doesn't it say in the Bible, love the stranger, for you were strangers once in the land of Egypt? Isn't it obligations from the Judeo-Christian tradition to love people, all people, no matter who they are? And now that we have 11 million people here who want to become American, who want to work jobs, who in many cases are working jobs that Americans don't want to work, like working in the fields, picking fruits and vegetables, that we should at least give them a chance, a shot to pay into the system legally if they pay penalties and get on some kind of a path.
Well, the reality is, in response to what you're saying about the Scripture's view of the stranger, we have the most generous, open-hearted, open-handed immigration policy in the world right now. We legalize 1.1 million people every year who play by the rules and come through the front door. Compassion does not require you to let somebody break into the back door and steal your stuff.
But, I mean, do you think, for instance, that, I mean, it's most of those people, most of those 1.1 million people, in many cases, even if they enter legally, we know that 40% of undocumented immigrants overstay their visas. We know that in many cases there are too few visas, whether it's low-skilled or high-skilled labor, to fill the kinds of jobs we need. And we know that for reasons that are not so liberal, because America's business community tells us that. Do you take issue with the claims made by the United States Chamber of Commerce and many multinational corporations in the United States that there are genuine labor shortages in these areas that can improve the United States' economy?
Well, I absolutely flatly reject the contention that there are jobs that Americans will not do, Daniel. I worked my way through college, working in a tomato shed, picking grapes, working in a raisin plant, working in a slaughterhouse, working in a car wash. I simply flatly reject the notion that there are jobs that Americans simply will not do, and I am living through. The problem is our unemployment benefits are so generous in this country. Our welfare benefits are so generous that a lot of Americans make more money sitting home in front of the TV.
Is that really the issue? Okay, I don't want to go down that just that hatch for a second, but you know that it's actually been the left that has been taking on unscrupulous employers who are interested in taking advantage of undocumented immigrants because if they work off the books, they have fewer labor protections. That's the kind of lawsuits that are going on, for instance, in the state of Georgia right now by the Southern Poverty Law Center, saying there are particularly and especially African-American low-income type workers that are interested in working those fields, as you said, but in this case, it's actually the employers that are working around that because they want to be able to exploit these workers. Why don't we make this about unscrupulous employers and corporations?
Well, I'm perfectly fine. I think E-Verify, an effective system of E-Verify.
Every measure in Rubio's bill goes after the immigrants themselves, nothing about the employers. And yet the right wing that apparently hates this undocumented immigration has nothing to say about that. Why is that?
Well, I don't think, first of all, I don't think...
Are you in favor of cracking down on employers?
I don't think employers should be required to serve as immigration agents, number one. But number two...
But you do think that states and local officials should?
How about let me finish my answer?
Okay.
We have this problem with 11 to 12 million illegal aliens in the country right now. I believe we have to put a system of E-Verify in place that's workable, that's tested, and we hold employers accountable to run everybody that wants a job through the E-Verify system. If they don't do it, I think there ought to be penalties.
Okay, well, I guess on that point we can agree. One last point, Brian, and that is that in terms of what goes on, I personally believe, and many economists have pointed that out, that in a global economy where the United States has signed NAFTA and there's free trade and free exchange of capital between these two countries, and there's been capital disruptions in Mexico, for instance, where multinational American corporations going in there has disrupted local businesses, making it harder in many cases for those folks to provide for their families. You don't think that if there's free movement of capital, there could be freer movement of people?
Well, I think every country, Dan, you have to admit that every country has the right to decide who gets to come in and out of their country. I don't think you would question the right of Saudi Arabia, for instance, to have any kind of immigration policies they want. That's the sovereign right of any nation on earth.
Well, I certainly agree with that, Brian, but I'm saying that the cost of that and the realisticness of that in a global economy is much harder. Brian, I'm sorry I have to leave it right there, but thank you so much for joining us on Take Action News.
You're welcome, Daniel. Anytime.
All right, you can listen to him at American Family Association. He's the Director of Issue Analysis, Brian J. Fisher. Take Action News continues. We're going to be talking with Dr. Digipol, our social media guru, after this.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Good afternoon and welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is guest host, executive producer Daniel Marins in studio today. The last week, David Shuster will be on paternity leave, June 22nd, 2013. Wow, we've had an amazing show so far. We just talked with what I gently called the politest right-wing fanatic I know, Brian Fisher, the director of issue analysis for the American Family Association. He's been on the show many times, and his perspective on immigration is fascinating. And I think, in certain ways, very principled, though I would argue far too stubborn and unwilling to look at the perspective, I think, from the people that are suffering right now, and a system that has failed people. We've got Dr. Digipol in studio today, Alan Rosenblatt, and we're going to talk with him about social media in a second. Alan, I had a story I wanted to cover, but first I want your reaction to that discussion I just had with Brian Fisher. What do you make of the points he was making? Well, I mean, Alan, I guess, how about this? Do you think when right-wingers say that immigration that this is just, it's simple, people violate the laws, let them go home, or even if it takes resources to send them home, it's unfair to the people who do try to come here legally? What do you make of that argument?
Well, first of all, it's an interesting strategy rhetorically to say, if they break the laws, we should just send them home, because then that allows them to simply say, oh, well, they're here illegally, therefore they're criminals, and we should send them all home. And it's I think it's an intentional slippery slope in that respect. I certainly think that, somebody who's guilty of violent crimes, I mean, we need to deal with them, period. But when it comes to, by and large, the people who are here, they're just trying to, I don't know, there's so many boogeymen that the right creates with regard to, the evil immigrant, illegal immigrant as the typical. I think in many ways it's a pure red herring. The vast majority of them are just simple people trying to make a living for their families and a future for themselves. And I think we sort of try to lump them all together into a large taught of evil people when in fact it's not true.
And I think it's very hard for poor people, let's say, living in some of these poor Central American, Latin American countries, in East Asia, to get here legally. I think that is also clear. That most of the people that do come here legally are already middle class generally. Right. That they know how to navigate that process to qualify for some of those visas. And of course, as I pointed out, 40% of undocumented immigrants came here originally legally and overstayed a visa. So I mean, there's so many components to this. Alan, I wanted to get your take. Obama was in Europe this week, and he spoke in Germany. He made a very dramatic speech there. He also spoke in UK, and we've got, I think, just a minute left at this point. But he apparently confused United Kingdom Finance Minister George Osborne with the soul singer Jeffrey Osborne, and he said, "I'm sorry, man, I must have confused you with my favorite R&B singer." The Chancellor of the Exchequer is 42. Doesn't look much like Jeff Osborne, a 65-year-old African-American singer-songwriter known for his 82 classic On the Wings of Love. Is this a diplomatic faux pas, or is it just, do the Brits just need to get a sense of humor?
Yes and yes, right? Diplomatic faux pas are all about saying something to somebody who has no sense of humor. Or often, I would say.
Which is funny, because I find that of all the European nations, the Brits are the best about humor. I mean, they have the funniest, thickest sarcasm, and I like the Continentals don't always get sarcasm, and the Brits, it's just dry, satirical wit.
Are you talking about Tories, or are you talking about Monty Python?
Well, there you go. I think it's safe to say the Monty Python folks were Labour Party at the most conservative. So when Take Action News continues in just a few moments, when our syndicated stations join us, we're going to talk more with Alan Rosenblatt.
Oh, drat these computers.
Have you people ever seen computers before?
I hear there's rumors on the internet.
Have used on the Google.
I gotta get on that internet. I'm late on everything.
A series of tubes.
They're so naughty and so complex.
Computers are my forte.
Welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting in our final hour of the program today. And of course, on this Saturday, June 22nd, 2013, David Shuster will be returning shortly from paternity leave. And that noise that you just heard can only mean one thing, and that is that sound, that music, that pattern, that melody can only mean one thing, and that is that it is time for social media with the one, the only, the Dr. Digipole, Alan Rosenblatt. Alan, how are you?
I'm doing great, Daniel. Good show so far, and hope it we keep it up for the next hour.
Well, I mean, if you jinx it like that, then we're in real trouble. But Alan, what have you got for us today on the social media front?
I love that series of tubes comment from Ted Stevens in the intro music to my segment, not noise, but. Looks like Facebook has created a new set of tubes by incorporating into Facebook posts and into Facebook search hashtags. This is something that Twitter has been using for quite some time, that Tumblr has tags, and it's Instagram has tags. And essentially what it does is it makes it easier to find things that people are sharing based on the topic rather than the person. And Facebook has long been seen as a social network that is in some ways hampered when it comes to advocacy and politics, because it's person to person. It's about connecting with your own networks, and it's not a large scale mass outreach channel like Twitter is, and to some degree, and that remains the case, that it's really ideal for talking to people who you're already friends with or that you're becoming friends with. But the hashtags allow for a whole new avenue, or a whole new tube, so to speak, of ways to interact with topics rather than interacting with people. And I think it's long overdue for Facebook. It's something we've been yelling at for quite some time. But it also has given
in the social media guru community.
In the social media guru community, yes.
So Alan, I mean, I gotta ask. I gotta barge in here on this because it is fascinating to me. And as you know, people have been doing hashtags on Facebook kind of as a jest in a way, sort of like the way people do it when you're talking to them. Hashtag too much information.
Right,
like that
right,
kind of
right,
thing. Like when Alan, when you tell me what you did on a Saturday night, I say hashtag too much information. But now they're basically going to be like, they're going to light up almost like a link, right? Or
right, exactly.
And
you'll be able to click on them and see what other people are saying with respect to that hashtag, and be able to follow the conversation around it, even if they're people who are not in your news feed because they're not friends with you. And that's really, I think, a huge, huge breakthrough.
But I gotta ask, there are hashtag detractors out there. You know them, I know them. Yeah. Some of us have them as friends, cousins, family members.
Right.
People that say only use them sarcastically. For sincerity, they're so 2009. I mean, do you know that phenomenon that people have just said you can search keywords in Twitter just as effective? How do you respond to those detractors?
Well, first of all, in order to search a keyword, I have to go to the search window or go to the search field and type it in. Whereas with a hashtag, I just have to click on it and it runs the search for me automatically. That is a huge difference, number one. Number two, the idea that the stuff can be fed to columns. Now, you can feed a keyword to a column, but the difference is that there is an intentionality associated with a hashtag. If I do a column in my TweetDeck, for example, for the keyword prism, I'm going to get people who are talking about rainbows as well as people who are talking about privacy and the National Security Agency. Whereas if I use hashtag prism, I'm only going to get the people who are talking about the surveillance program, and not about people talking about those fancy, highly faceted cut pieces of glass.
That's such a good, fascinating point, Alan. I really I appreciate that. And you are the defender of the hashtags, the capital D defender. And we'll wait to see how it plays out. But I think you make some very good points about their ongoing relevance. Let me ask you this: you've said that Facebook is a medium that traditionally was immune to some political involvement because it was very personal networky, and it still is. And now all the old fogies are on it.
Not so much immune, but it just was a challenge to use it for organizing. Typically, unless you were doing organizing for a local event or a local politician or issue, it's very good for that, because typically we know that the average Facebook user, about 80% of their friends are local and 20% of them are not local, whereas on Twitter it tends to be the reverse. 80% are not local and only 20% are local. So when you use Twitter, you're talking to a national audience. When you use Facebook, you tend to be talking to a very local or very personally connected audience. That made using it for organizing, where you're trying to reach out and build a larger community and turn that into some sort of advocacy movement, it made it very, very difficult. And so anything that Facebook does that allows you to reach out to more people outside of your community, outside of your personal network, is a boon to organizers, is a boon to advocacy.
Do you put this, we've now seen Facebook, obviously they're leading the charge with this Forward.us, a controversial political advocacy group for many of these tech companies out in Silicon Valley, and they're really throwing in their weight on the immigration debate, and people argue as to their relative success in that regard, but certainly they're putting money, these executives, into kind of the advertising component of this, and they've also engaged people on Facebook, and obviously Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO and founder of Facebook, has been at the helm on this. Is this all part and parcel of that Mark Zuckerberg is now, he's gotten the political bug and he wants to make this more politicized, and so hashtags are a follow-up on Forward.us?
So number one, I think that the whole Forward.us is about Zuckerberg's politics, not Facebook's politics. When you run a big tech company, your concerns about immigration are different than if you are an immigration advocate. You're looking for H-1B visas, you're looking for high-tech, high-skilled people because that's who you need to hire. That's a very different strategy, and it changes how you look at it. As far as the hashtags and politicizing Facebook and making Facebook, I don't think Zuckerberg is motivated by making Facebook more effective for politics. I think he's motivated by making Facebook more competitive with other social networks. Facebook has been basically copying functionality from other platforms as they take off. So when Google Plus came out and had the ability to create circles where you could share your content, your posts, with very specific sub-segments of your total contact list on Google Plus, eventually Facebook implemented similar kind of, they had already had lists, but you couldn't do anything with them. And now when you post something on your Facebook wall, you're able to identify who can see it and who can't see it, a la Google Plus. And I think that the hashtags is basically an acknowledgement of the fact that hashtags serve an incredible use on Twitter to reach people outside of your network, outside of your personal network, and I think Facebook saw that as something people were clamoring for. I think that the biggest complaints against hashtags in Twitter, and go back to your earlier point about it being sort of a clutter or distracting, are people who use too many hashtags or use hashtags that are too obscure, or they're not using it very effectively or strategically, and it seems to take away from the substance of the message. On Facebook, I think it's a different story. There is this tendency, because Facebook posts are longer, that you can put a lot of hashtags in it, and people are going to go, oh, then it's going to make it completely unreadable. But I think quite the contrary. Because Facebook allows you to create a very long post, you can write some very clear narrative prose, then skip a space, put a link, and then skip a couple of spaces and put a bunch of hashtags at the bottom as almost a footnote. It's not disrupting the read of the post itself, and it gets all that functionality to connect it to all these conversations across the bottom. And in a way, it serves a purpose that's much more akin to the way we use tags in blog posts, as opposed to the way, above and beyond the way we use hashtags in Twitter.
Well, it's fascinating stuff. Alan, do you have a favorite hashtag at the moment? You invented the DOH hashtag. We've established that.
Yeah, I invented DOH and I invented Top Prog.
You've fought other hashtags. You've got into Twitter gladiator matches with Unite Blue a little bit.
And with Eric Cantor, very often with Eric Cantor.
My favorite hashtag, full repeal.
My favorite hashtag personally is think till it hurts. That's kind of my mantra. That's one that I use. I don't think anybody else uses it unless they're retweeting me. Occasionally people see it and they like it. But the idea is that there's so many people out there that are just making all these ridiculous statements that if they just thought it through, they would see that they're making no sense. And so I force them to, so when I push back on somebody who's making no sense with some clarity, I think, in the conversation, I will throw in sort of a snarky think till it hurts hashtag.
Well, Alan, I'm thinking till it hurts because every time you talk on Take Action News, it stimulates me.
Well, that's my job.
And it makes me thinking. And so I value that and that opportunity, and these ideas are incredible. Alan, when's the next Internet Advocacy Roundtable? Alan has been hosting these roundtables that are live streamed on the internet that you can get all kinds of tips from Alan and other experts about how best to run your campaign and everything like that.
So we just had one this past Thursday on online advertising innovation. It was really great. The video is up on We Act Radio's
that's youtube.com/We Act Radio DC.
Yep. And the next one is July 18th. It usually is on the third Thursday of the month from noon to 2. I'm still trying to nail down the topic. I'm hoping to put together a panel that is focused on how advocacy organizations can use the Sunlight Foundation's Open Data API, but I still haven't nailed that one down. That at some point we'll do that one. Hopefully it'll be this month. If not, I'll have to come up with something else.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to start posting this information on Take Action News' Facebook page with Alan's permission, I hope. And so that folks, if you want to learn about how to become it takes years, but if you want to start learning how to become an Alan Rosenblatt, or at least just do the kind of work that he does in terms of using the internet to run advocacy campaigns, the Internet Advocacy Roundtable is not to be missed. It's the third Thursday of every month. You can watch on the live stream. You can attend in person. Definitely check it out.
You can follow the Twitter stream at #IAR.
All right, #IAR and #IAR at IAR if you want to follow the actual Twitter handle itself. And of course, just stay tuned for more info on that. The one coming up on July 18th. So that's fascinating stuff. Alan Rosenblatt, as always. Alan's going to be back a little bit later talking with us about the Paul Dean controversy at 2:30. So that's exciting. Stick around. We've got our Activist of the Week up next.
Great.
Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting this week as we are coming to an end, toward the end of our show at this point. But it would not be Take Action News if we did not have our Activist of the Week segment, celebrating every week as we do the heroes, the advocates across the country that are doing the unsung work to make America and the world a better place. Joining me right now in studio is one such person, Valentina Stackel. Valentina is a project coordinator for the Poder Sano program, which works on HIV/AIDS issues for the rural Latino communities for the organization known as Farm Worker Justice. Valentina, thank you so much for joining me on Take Action News.
It's an honor, Daniel. Thank you.
So, Valentina, tell us first of all, what is Farm Worker Justice and what is Poder Sano?
Okay, well, to get started, Farm Worker Justice is a nonpartisan organization that works here in D.C. That tries to ensure that farm worker rights everywhere, all across the country, are protected. And we do that through litigation, we do that through advocacy, and we do that through a variety of health programs. Some of them are occupational health and safety, because, obviously that's a big issue. And then some others, we focus on HIV, which is where my program comes in, which is called Poder Sano, which translated it means sort of healthy strength. And it's a community mobilization project where we work with communities all around the country to sort of see what the needs are in HIV prevention. And most often we do that through Promotores de Salud programs, which are translated into their community health worker models. And that basically means that they're folks from the community who know the community really well, who we provide capacity to so that they themselves can train their peers and educate their peers on HIV issues.
So I think that is when we think about farm workers and the fact that, some people know the history of the struggle that there has been in this country for the folks that are picking our food in many cases to have basic wage representation rights, particularly if they don't have citizenship and therefore don't have some of the same legal protections. Obviously, Cesar Chavez did a lot of the important pioneering work in that regard. What can people know about the conditions that farm workers currently experience?
Sure. I think that it baffles me that we don't know what's going on. We all eat, right? You had, I'm sure, some fruits and vegetables today.
A
banana, exactly. I definitely have. And something that we do every day, we don't know where it comes from. Your food does not come from the supermarket. Your food comes from 2 million workers. If you include their families and their children, it's 4.5 million people who live in this country who pick your fruits and vegetables every day. And they get paid less than minimum wage. They work in extremely hazardous conditions. They don't have the protections that other workers have all around the country. And so, we have to take responsibility as a people. Like, if we eat, we need to know where our food comes from and what the labor conditions are. So I think definitely a good first step is there's a lot of, the United Farm Workers that Cesar Chavez founded, or our website, www.farmworkerjustice.org. You can get a lot of information on what you can do and learn about what's going on out there in the rural areas.
Now, specifically in Poder Sano, which is health through strength, or strength health, or I'm botching Spanish here, but you work specifically on HIV/AIDS detection, prevention, and treatment. What should people know about the problems with HIV/AIDS in the rural Latino community?
Sure.
And is it something that is hard to talk about publicly because of the stigmas that are associated with it?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest issues that we have right now is that there's a huge lack of data, because nobody wants to put money into small-scale studies or studies in rural areas or studies, in with farm workers. It just isn't done, unfortunately. But there have been some small-scale studies that show that, the HIV rate can be up to 10 times as high as the general population. Now, looking at that as well as the social determinants of health, that is to say, poverty, immigration status, substandard housing, mobile lifestyle, discrimination, all of these things increase your risk for HIV tremendously. And so that's why I think it's sort of the perfect storm in the rural Latino communities and among farm workers, because they're already, exposed to so many different risk factors. And another thing that we're looking at is there's a lot of loneliness and isolation. One of the biggest risk groups actually is heterosexual women in Mexico. What happens a lot is that they stay back in Mexico. Their husbands or boyfriends travel north to work. And there, they have sex with commercial sex workers. They have sex with other men, with each other, unprotected sex. They come home and infect their wives with HIV, because you can't really demand a condom from your husband. That's just not done. So like you said, I think a lot of these issues, you have to tread very carefully. We know that the epidemic is being driven by men who have sex with men, but we call that in public health lingo MSM. But that's not an identifiable group. It's not a group that you self-identify with. And so it's, do we talk about sex in general, like use a condom when you have sex in general, or are we specific maybe risking that people won't listen because they don't identify even though they engage in those behaviors. So it's definitely very difficult, but I think because we work with community organizations on the ground that know their communities very well, that are part of their communities, it makes it much easier for sort of outsiders, for academics, for, all of us to sort of come in and come up with the best solutions for, specific geographic communities.
Do you feel like you're making progress?
I think all of us who work in this kind of field, we hope that we make progress, because otherwise why would we get up in the morning, right? I think so, I hope so. And I think especially now with immigration reform, hopefully making some progress as well. I think that's going to make a really big difference for farm workers. I mean, fear of deportation and other issues like that have been such a huge problem in terms of receiving health care. People are afraid to go to the doctor because they're afraid they're going to get deported. So hopefully that's going to make a big difference. And I think they're going to start voting on it on Monday. So hopefully they'll get done before the 4th of July recess with the immigration reform.
Well,
crossing my fingers.
I'm with you there, and I'm certainly hoping for that, though I think that the House of Representatives is still a big question mark and a big hurdle there. But it's such a good point that you make, that when we keep people in the shadows, we increase the spread of horrible diseases like HIV/AIDS. And even if you think that all these people that came here that are not necessarily having permanent legal status as citizens should leave, you should consider that an American question, because that's going to spread. And that's from a very practical perspective, I think that's something that people might want to take into consideration. And I think it's a very important way to sort of put a local and human face on this broader issue of immigration reform.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, Valentina, how did you decide to become an activist and not, let's say, a management consultant at, I don't know, Booz Allen Hamilton?
It never occurred to me. Their paycheck's probably a little higher, right? I come from a family of immigrants. My mom had to leave Chile during the dictatorship in 1983 over there, and we've moved around a lot. And my parents are both they're both activists, and I don't think I could have ever done anything different. So, join me. I'm here.
Well, Valentina, I'm sorry that your mother had to flee, but I'm glad that we got to have you here in the United States. You are our Activist of the Week. Congratulations. And thank you, Valentina Stagel, for Farm Worker Justice. Valentina's going to stick around when we talk about Paula Deen next after this break.
You're listening to We At Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Twitter backlash. What is it? Policy.
And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting. There was some really swift social media, I would say, public indictment and conviction of the Food Network star Paula Deen when it was revealed in a leak of a deposition, a lawsuit against her, that she was apparently being accused of being racist along with her brother to some of her black employees at a restaurant that she owned in Georgia. This was apparently filed by a white employee, though, who has black family members and multiracial sort of family, and who felt intimidated in that environment, and that apparently she held black employees to a different standard, that she used the N-word in the workplace, and that at one point she mused to her employees that she wanted to cater a very southern wedding, which apparently meant to her a quote-unquote Jim Crow plantation-style wedding where all the servers are black and wear sort of white jackets and serve all the white people. This was then corroborated further. Apparently, she then admitted in the deposition to having used the N-word multiple times, whether in public or not. This was corroborated further when Talking Points memo unearthed from her memoir that she said that she at one point wanted to hit one of her black neighbors with a bolo bat. I don't know what a bolo bat is, but that sounds nasty. And other folks came forward and have said also that she may have used the N-word at different times. She was forced to make an apology, and she issued an apology on YouTube that she then took down. But this was before, and the Food Network eventually responded by saying that, announcing they would not renew her contract and her show. Before that was news, she made a very sort of, I think, clearly emotional apology on YouTube, but it was taken down very quickly, in which she said that she really apologizes for making this hurtful language, and really begged for forgiveness. Hear how she put it in that apology that was then pulled and withdrawn from YouTube.
Inappropriate, hurtful language is totally unacceptable. I beg for your forgiveness.
That was just a couple of edited little excerpts there from that much longer apology, but really, I think you'd be hard pressed to say that, at least on the face of it, that she was not extremely contrite in admitting wrongdoing, in saying that it's not who she's about at the same time, and really begging forgiveness from her fans, from her staff, from everyone. Now, later she was asked to come on to speak with Matt Lauer on the Today Show on NBC. Apparently she was emotionally unprepared to do that. She was in a fragile state, and so she declined. And she withdrew that original apology and from YouTube, though Talking Points Memo was able to somehow capture it and republish it after it had been taken down. And she then gave an explanation for why she didn't go on Matt Lauer to talk with Matt Lauer on NBC. And this was also after she heard the news that her contract wouldn't be renewed. And I think you can tell that she's a little bit less apologetic and more mad at the media for the way that she was depicted. And how we can put that in context. Here's what she said about not coming to speak with Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show.
That my family and I are not the kind of people that the press is wanting to say we are.
So in other words, she said, I'm sorry I couldn't come on to talk with Matt Lauer. I just was not emotionally prepared to do it. And she did also say that this kind of intolerance is alien to me. It's not about who I am. But she made a point of going after the press, as that quote just showed. I'm not who the press says I am, and making it also just generally more about her and defending her image. So I want to put this out there. What are we to make of these two apologies? I mean, is there a substantive difference here? I mean, it seems like she was still apologetic in the second one. Why'd she withdraw the first one? And should she really be fired for this? Valentino, our activist of the week, are people overreading the difference between these two apologies?
I kind of saw them as the same. Personally, to me, it doesn't matter what she says. The N-word is never okay to use, I think. And I think it's fine that she's being punished, quote unquote, for it.
Retroactively?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising to me that people didn't know this before. It seems like and also I'm surprised that people are surprised. She is, after all, a white woman from the South, and I don't want to make that sound trite or anything like that, but that is the culture that many people grow up in. That's the culture that people live in, where it's not a problem to use the N-word because everybody around you uses it. In the jokes, she also, I think, refers to Jews, gays, maybe lesbians, Mexicans.
Well, I think she said something like, everybody knows, 90% of jokes are about Jews, blacks, and rednecks.
Rednecks, right? That's maybe true.
Were gay people in there?
Who knows? Probably. And so
the black Jewish gay redneck is really upset about that characterization.
That one, yes, absolutely. But then, I had a moment where I was reading through my Twitter feed, and Carla Hall, who was one of the top chef candidates, and she's a DC chef. She's an African American woman. She tweeted at Paula Deen, and she said, "I support you, girl. I love you." And that really blew me away. I was like, wow, here's somebody who is in this Food Network world, who is an African American woman who forgives Paula Deen. So I don't know what to make of it now.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, what is your take? You want to weigh in on this?
Well, there's a couple different levels here. On one level, the question is, using the N-word in the past. And if she isn't using it currently, if that's the basis.
A former N-word user.
I mean,
recovering.
I think Valentina makes the right point that she grew up in the South. She's 66 years old. In the 60s, that was commonplace. And so when she was asked if she'd ever used the word, the answer obviously is, well, yeah. When I was.
But this is someone that worked for her more recently, at least in the 80s.
So the more disturbing issues are: is she currently using it? But I think I'm reading here about other things with regard to how she treats her employees and who gets promoted. And apparently an older black woman who basically helped her create all of her recipes was paid less than $10 an hour. Things like that. So I think the issue isn't just the use of the word. The issue is whether or not it has revealed a pattern of racism, both in the workplace and in conversation. At that level, that's a revelation that really hampers and taints her reputation. And now I can see Food Network saying, we don't want to be associated with that. If it was just about, I used the word when I was younger, and times have changed, and I've learned that.
And I may have maybe thought about beating people up because they were black. Okay, throw that one in there. But right. Alan, it's such a good point though in terms of the process of thinking about this person and her actions, her speech, because you're a social media guru, Alan, and this execution happened, quite frankly, very swiftly in no small part because of the brouhaha, especially I think on Twitter, and people calling for her head. I mean, especially and including prominent black media personalities like Toure on MSNBC, Goldie Taylor, folks like that. Whether they explicitly called for a resignation or not, these were the people that were bringing attention to it. Is there a trial process here in terms of ending someone's career essentially?
So let's look at a historical example. At Strom Thurmond's, I think, 100th birthday party, Trent Lott, who was at the time the Senate Majority Leader for the Republican Party, was
which is clearly, by the way, somewhat inferior to the position of a host on the Food Network.
Somewhat. But he made a comment. He said this country would be a much better place if Strom Thurmond had actually won the presidency when he ran as a Dixiecrat in 1948. What the mainstream press basically sort of glossed that over, and the blogosphere went crazy on this because they said, well, wait a minute, he was running on a segregationist platform in 1948. And so the idea, basically, Trent Lott was saying this country would have been better off if we were able to have implemented a segregationist policy with Strom Thurmond as president of the United States. As a result of the uproar from the blogosphere on that, the mainstream press then picked up the story, and Trent Lott ultimately had to resign as majority leader and ultimately didn't run for re-election and is no longer in the Senate. He was the most powerful Republican in the Congress at the time, I
mean, Trent Lott also made it worse. I mean, he gave apologies that were racially insensitive somehow.
Sure, but the point is that
that was an explicit statement that was recorded. I mean, there was no controversy. I mean, these are claims that are brought against her, and she's made some admissions about past actions. It seems a little bit less clear cut, and
Yeah, but I think the point I really want to make here is that it wasn't whether or not the transgression was bad; it was how the public reacted to it, and the public forced the media to pick up the story and created those implications, those consequences for Trent Lott. In this case, remember, she's not a member of Congress; she's a TV star, and the audience is everything. And so when Twitter erupts...
And the threshold is lower.
Right, but when Twitter erupts, even though the press hasn't been making a big deal of it, when Twitter erupts, that's the audience erupting. And that's something that Food Network has to be very attentive to. And so from a business perspective of a TV network, when you see a massive revolution on Twitter against one of your stars, that means your star's ability to be a star has been seriously damaged. And that is a fundamental issue with regard to her value to the Food Network. And if they believe that hurt her audience potential to the point where she was no longer worth the money they were paying her, well, then indeed the business decision is to let her go.
I think that's a valid point. Alan, there's been some, and I can bring I'll get back to you, Valentina, too. But there's been some discussion as to whether there've been a lot of jokes on Twitter about this, and I worry that you could tell us a little bit about that. I mean, but. I want to hear your take on that. Give us a little perspective on what that Paula Deen TV shows, I think, was a hashtag. Does it cross the line in terms of, and I've been making jokes, and some friends have said to me, you're a white dude, this isn't funny.
Yeah.
If you were the target of this, you might be a little bit more sensitive about it. So where does it cross the line? Obviously, racism is really serious, and it's still really prevalent. So
I'm going to take this from the point where I was saying Food Network was concerned about the audience reaction. And part of the problem with using Twitter in this context to measure the audience reaction to Paula Deen's situation is that there are a lot of jokes out there. Paula Deen TV shows, Paula Deen's recipes, Paula's best dishes. And as a result of these hashtags, people are just jumping on trying to be funny. So we're getting things like Paula Deen TV shows, The Amazing White Race, or The Amazing Racist, or 2 3/5 Men, which I think is really amazing. And I won't even mention some of the recipes because they appropriate the N-word into the recipe names. But the bottom line is there is this point at which you have to assess: is this really the audience reacting in a way that would hurt Paula Deen's viewership and justify Food Network's decision from a business perspective, or is this people jumping on to a funny hashtag at the expense of Paula Deen?
Valentina, you're someone who has roots in another country. Your mom is from Chile, and I believe you spent time in Austria. So you've got an international perspective on this. I mean, we've got a couple minutes left. Does this seems uniquely American to me. Mm-hmm. This manner of, and for better and for worse, really, and a lot of times for better, that there's a real sensitivity to racial issues, at least in the public sphere, in terms of media figures, and that's taken decades to build up, mm-hmm. and a willingness to come down hard on people for it in this kind of swift way. Does that have a parallel in any of the countries that you're familiar with, Austria, Chile? And if so, do you think it's a positive thing?
I think they're not quite there yet in Austria, which is where I grew up. I think immigration is much newer there. It's not like the United States that was founded on immigrants. There's a lot of groups, Turkish, Moroccan, North African, and other groups that have sort of recently come in the 80s and late 70s. And so to be outwardly racist is still a thing. And it's not necessarily explained away or forgiven or anything like that, but people, even in power, in power positions, will say things where your eyes bulge and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that person just said that. So I think even though in the United States, I think we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go because, as I said before, it's never acceptable to use the N-word. So.
And I would say, and I think that's a very valuable perspective, and I appreciate that. And I would say I share some of the feelings of my friend Zed Jelani, who's a blogger and a resident, a native of Georgia himself. His parents are immigrants from Pakistan, I believe. Who took to Twitter yesterday and essentially said he was calling, I think, for dialogue and forgiveness. And also, and I would say that regardless of that, and I'm not crying any tears over Paula Deen, I wish that we could summon this kind of swift reaction about some of the more institutional embedded racial problems we have in this country. And none is larger, quite frankly, than our criminal justice system and the fact that we lock up some nearly 800,000 people every year for marijuana possession or marijuana-related crimes, and they are 8-to-1 more likely to be black or, as the case may be, in some cases Latino, but certainly especially black. And there is just about nothing that hurts black people more than, at least institutionally, than that policy. And so get us a good hashtag on that and some swift action, but I just don't think it works that way, unfortunately. When we come back, we're going to round out the show with my little How It Should Be segment, a little bit of a rant, as always. Going to want to hear this. So stay tuned when Take Action News continues and completes after this.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying free consultation at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
Back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marin's guest hosting, and this is normally my segment, and I will stay in the segment. And Alan Rosenblatt, stay where you are. I want to bring you in on this a little bit, because I know Alan I have a How It Should Be segment today, but I know Alan's going to have strong opinions about it. So I think that's an important thing here. There was a Q&A earlier this week with Edward Snowden on The Guardian, and he answered sort of through he answered through Glenn Greenwald and sort of the reporters of The Guardian questions from readers. And one of the things that he talked about is that explaining why he didn't sort of turn himself in or anything like that, and why he chose to go to Hong Kong. And here's what he said. First, the U.S. government, just as they did with other whistleblowers, immediately and predictably destroyed any possibility of a fair trial at home, openly declaring me guilty of treason, and the disclosure of secret criminal and even unconstitutional acts is unforgivable crime. That's not justice, and it would be foolish to volunteer yourself to it if you can do more good outside of prison than in it. Okay, if you can do more good outside of prison than in it. Now, some people have said that Snowden fleeing to Hong Kong is the crucial difference between himself and Ellsberg, or Manning for that matter, in that, and Alan, I don't want to get exactly into all the details of their differences, but one of the crucial differences. Now, Ellsberg initially fled the law. He did. He went into hiding. But eventually he was apprehended, or rather he turned himself in to a federal court and everything like that. He was only really let off the hook because the Nixon administration broke into a psychiatrist's office, really violating the Constitution in so many ways. But there's a real controversy here as to whether a hero, someone who's willing to go down for a principle that they have, needs to go down in order for that principle to be validated, in order for that to be something that is valid, a valid tactic there. And I think, and I think it's personally, look, I think Snowden's points are correct. When the United States government immediately labels you a traitor, I mean, there have been murder cases that have been thrown out in D.C. because the prosecutor insinuates guilt before the trial begins. But when people at the highest levels of government, including the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, other folks have called it an act of treason, there is reason to think that he wouldn't get a fair trial. We also know that Bradley Manning, according to many independent monitors and according to the United Nations, was tortured under military custody. So I think that when a person's life is on the line and they're wondering whether they're going to be tortured or not, yeah, I think that they have a right to seek a little bit of international redress. And that's a point that Howard Zinn makes in the book Declarations of Independence, when he said that people always talk about accepting the crime and Martin Luther King went to prison and everything like that, but other people didn't go to prison. Father Berrigan, a Catholic priest during the Vietnam War, went on the run, and as a result, he was able to do more to help oppose the Vietnam War in that time, and Martin Luther King also wasn't facing death in that prison. So those are important things to consider, and that's how I think it should be. We didn't have time to hear from Alan Rosenblatt, but on behalf of David Shuster, who is coming back next week, Alan Rosenblatt, who has helped me shepherd this hour, and everyone else on our team, including Pete, Johnny, Deb Callahan, all of our guests today, this is Daniel Marins saying have a good week and see you next Saturday on Take Action News.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.